Hey there! Thanks so much for joining me today on the Education Breakdown. I'm curious for you listeners. Have you ever noticed how the state of your home or the state of your office, maybe how messy or disorganized it feels, how that really impacts you? I know for me, there comes a point in my week where my kitchen counter has accumulated stuff all week long, and I can feel the tension in my body. Or maybe on the flip side, you can kind of think about that after you have taken the time to clean off your desk, maybe you light a candle or open a window. The outward environment around us really shapes us in ways that we aren't always conscious about. And the same is very true for our children, maybe perhaps even more. So today I am joined by Kirsten Horton. She is a child development and learning environment specialist. She has spent nearly 2 decades in early childhood education, teaching kindergarten, mentoring new teachers, and consulting on school environments. And now she leads Joyful Learning Environments, where she teaches parents and educators how to use the physical environment as their most powerful tool for shaping children's behavior and their focus. Her work has been featured in Parents Magazine, Newsweek, and Martha Stewart Living, and she's spoken at national education conferences across the country. Kirsten also works at St. David's School in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she serves as the Assistant Director of Admissions for their lower school. So we are very lucky to have her with us today. Kirsten, thank you so much for being here.
Well, hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic with you today.
Yeah, me too. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up. So let's start by having you just introduce yourself to us. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your education and work background, and really what led you to found Joyful Learning Environments.
Absolutely. Kirsten Horton, I study something that most people never think about. And so that is how the environment around children is really affecting them. So affecting their behavior, things like their emotional regulation, their academic performance and learning, of course. And just their focus and their overall well-being. Like you were just talking about your kitchen counter. Like we know as adults how clutter and our environment affect us. We know when we're in a space that feels really comfortable and safe, like a beautiful restaurant or a beautiful hotel. And we know when we're someplace that feels just kind of icky and we like want to get out of it, like a gas station or something like that. And so kids are feeling that same thing too all the time. And specifically thinking about they're spending most of their time, based on research, most of their time that's awake is spent at school. And so these spaces that they're spending their school days in are so very important. And so, like you talked about, I taught kindergarten for 12 years. I now work in admissions. I truly just love families and kids and schools and just helping those things work together to thrive. I believe that there's no one right learning environment, that the things that we're going to talk about today can truly be applied, whether you're at a Montessori school, a homeschool, a traditional school, public school, independent. Like these are just things that are based on research, that really help kids thrive.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm really excited, and we're just going to dive in and get to all the juicy stuff. So, I'm hoping you can give us an example of like a before and after. So, what sorts of things do you see and hear from parents and teachers that they experience that are causing them stress, that cause them frustration? And what's an example of how your work could improve that for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll think of a residential example and
Okay.
a school example. So for school, I mentored several teachers during my career, and one of the things that I love to help them with was classroom management. That is probably the number one request for help that I got as a teaching mentor and a team lead. And so that would be, going in to help the STEAM teacher with routines or a kindergarten teacher, or first grade teacher. That truly is kind of the biggest thing because you can't teach if kids are not focused and moving in an organized manner throughout the space.
Mhm.
So one particular classroom that comes to mind is in my last year teaching, I had a first year kindergarten teacher across the hall, and she was a fabulous teacher. Very, very good, engaging, energetic. Like the kids loved her. And she came to me one day and she was like, Kirsten, I'm having such a hard time getting them under control. So, because I had observed her a few times, I knew that her curriculum was strong, her teaching practice was strong, her rapport with the students was strong. And when I walked in with that lens of, okay, what is the missing piece? I could like see it immediately. She had her reading corner, which should be a quiet area, was set up right next to the door. So the kids were not actually sitting and engaging in books. They were, kind of getting the books and playing with them. And then she had her building center in the back part of the room, which is, typically a building center is going to be loud. You've got blocks, you've got collaboration. But then through the middle of her room, like I just noticed kids would kind of take off and run through that space. There was just a wide open space. And so sometimes I just want to remind teachers and parents that we can't hold kids, like you don't want to make them feel bad for doing what's developmentally appropriate. It is developmentally appropriate for a 5-year-old to see a wide open space and to want to take off and run. That is their instinct. And so there are certain ways that we can set up environments to kind of set them up for success. And so that was one of those things where I was like, oh, I see the problem here. A 5-year-old wants to run. And if we've got this big open zone in the middle of the room, they're just going to do that instinctively. And so we started out with like rearranging her tables, moving her tables to the middle of the room to kind of help with that traffic flow, help slow it down a little bit. And we switched her reading area and her block area so that then she had her loud collaborative thing by the door, which is your most high traffic, high noise area. And then she had her little reading nook back, in a quiet space where kids could go not only just to actually focus on like reading and practicing looking at books, but also if they needed a quiet minute, like that became kind of a little safe space for them. So that's just kind of a school example. It didn't cost us any money. That's like my big thing with teaching parents and especially teachers. It does not take a big renovation budget. Like it's just truly learning how do you set up an environment to help the people within it succeed.
Mhm.
And then thinking about a residential example. So I briefly ran a little boutique playroom design business when I lived in Memphis. We moved to Raleigh in 2023. But during that time, I would go in and consult with families on like a Saturday morning. I would be like, I want to see the worst of the worst. Like, be in your PJs, have your kids there. I'll bring you coffee. Like, I just want to walk through your space and like help you kind of, think about how can you set up your children for success. And so with that, I'm thinking specifically, there was this one family, they had done this beautiful home renovation. They had hired an interior designer for all the spaces except for the kids' spaces. And she was just like, they had this huge, beautiful playroom. So enormous space, beautiful hardwood floors. Well, I mean, this vaulted ceilings, big windows, everything perfect. But she was like, I don't know what to do with it. And she was like, I don't want to like put up monkey bar. Like, I'm not into that. I just want to know, like, well, what do I do with this space? And when I walked up there, the toys were just strewn all over the floor. There was like a big gymnastics mat, in the middle, right next to Barbie Dream House. And it was just kind of chaotic. And I remember thinking like, and like, kind of gently walking through her with like, how do you feel when you walk in this space? And she'd be like, oh, I feel totally overwhelmed. I don't want to come in here. But then I was like, so how do you think like your 5 and your 7-year-old feel when they come in here? Like, is it guiding them to, okay, now we're going to sit down and do arts and crafts. Now we're going to play with Barbies. Or is it just kind of chaos? So with that, we really just set up little zones. And so we went through, we made a gross motor zone, and they had like the gymnastics mat and a little climbing, the little angular climbing thing.
Mhm.
Um, and then a block center, an art center, and really just kind of zoned it out so that each space was telling the kids exactly what to do. So those are examples of just ways that you can use your environment. Does not need to cost money. Maybe you want to, buy some organizing bins or something, but it truly is just like thinking through how is the space guiding behavior.
Yeah. I love that, like the example that you gave with the classroom where they had kind of the running space, and like you said,
Mhm.
there all the things were there in terms of a strong teacher, the curriculum, all these pieces were right. And then the tweaks that you had to make, like you said, they cost nothing. It was just
Right.
thinking through what are these spaces telling the children to do and how to behave and how to act. And that is like that's just so cool. And I love that you shared both of those, the classroom and the home environment. So, something else that I know affects me personally is natural lighting. So,
Mhm.
I have noticed that I feel calmer, I feel more alert, I'm better able to focus when I can either work outside or work near a window. And that's just a personal experience. So, I'm curious, can you tell us what does the research show about the importance of natural light, maybe especially for children? And how would someone know if they have enough natural light in their, whether it's their kind of home or homeschool space or a learning environment at school?
Yeah, that is a great question. So you are not alone in just feeling better around sunlight. That is universally true, regardless of culture or country or age, whatever demographic. We all, as humans, just kind of thrive around natural light. And so that's one of the big things that I talk to parents and teachers about when I'm walking through classrooms or walking through homes is open your blinds. Like if you have blinds, that I know that, we all want to have privacy, but open those up because you need as much natural light as you can get. So specifically for young kids, their eyesight is still developing in a lot of ways. And so natural light improves their eyesight and their eyesight health. And for us too, as adults, there are so many benefits. It increases energy. It suppresses cortisol, which is your stress hormone. It boosts serotonin, which is your happy hormone. So, like, we're truly all just feeling more joyful and happy and alert, like you said, with natural light. And so, some ways that you can utilize that in your learning space or in your home. Number one is like having those curtains open. And I do love just like in our house, we have the curtains that you just draw across. So we don't do blinds. All of our windows are blind free. But we do have curtains for those times, if it's daytime and my kids are sick and there's a glare on the TV, but they, need to watch it, then I will close those. Or at bedtime, of course, we're closing the curtains in the bedrooms. But for the most part, we don't really want to have blinds because it's just blocking unnecessary light. So that's one of my top things. Another thing that I would like for people to think through is if you can't have natural light, so there are plenty of, schools that are built to maximize efficiency and storage and space and to, quite frankly, get as many people into a space as they can. So there are spaces that end up in schools and churches, that don't have natural light, and then that's okay. There are other ways to work around that. The biggest thing is definitely you want to have lamps so you can, see behind like lamps. This is not my true office, but in my true office, which has no windows, I have 7 lamps and they're kind of layered. So I have kind of lamps on a higher shelf that are shining down. And then those are, the light bulbs that you choose are really important. So the ones that I have shining straight down are more lights that mimic sunlight. And then the ones that I have kind of horizontally are the warmer light bulbs. And so that is a quick little change that you can make is just thinking about the light bulbs. Are they mimicking daylight? And if so, that's when you want them to be shining down.
Mm.
But if they're coming at you from the side, it's really disorienting to have that daylight feeling coming horizontally. So you want
Hmm.
those to be your warmer glow, lower lumen light bulbs. And then the last thing is task lighting. So this truly is, for example, at my desk, I have kind of an overhead cabinet, and underneath, I just have some little magnetic rechargeable lights. And when I'm working there, I turn those little lights on. That's actual task lighting that's shining right on my paper. In a lot of learning spaces specifically, we only rely on fluorescent lighting from the ceiling, and that causes a lot of fatigue, a lot of headaches, a lot of stress. And as much as we can get away from relying specifically on that overhead lighting, the better. And then in homes, kind of the same thing. If you have a homeschool room, and I don't think I mentioned that I was homeschooled from pre-K through 8th grade. So I just remember my learning space so vividly. We learned at our dining room table. We had a beautiful south-facing window. Like we were just in natural light all day, every day. I could lay on the floor and just work in the sunlight, and it was so pleasant. So if you're homeschooling, you have that advantage that you can truly set up your learning environment to kind of follow the sun around your house. But even then, you're still going to want like some lamps, you've got some natural light, but I just urge people, teachers and parents, to get away from that overhead lighting as much as you can. We really don't want to rely on it too much.
Okay. I am definitely a lamp person myself.
Yes.
And I mean, in the living room, like I never turn on the overhead light.
Yes.
Like I never want that thing on.
Oh.
But I mean, you're right. A lot of schools, it's the fluorescent lighting, the huge rectangles on
Mhm.
the ceiling. And some classrooms that I've been in the past couple of years, I've seen teachers where they're kind of covering them up with maybe it's like a colored sheet or maybe it's some sort of tissue paper. I'm not exactly sure what they're
Mhm.
using, but I can tell that like, people are starting to realize like this is not good for
Yeah.
our functioning.
Yeah.
And so it's really good for you to share with us that like that's backed by research. Like that is something that is
Absolutely.
proven that it does fatigue us, it wears on our focus. So that's, yeah, fluorescent lights. I
Yes.
can't do them.
And what you're talking about, like, I love it when teachers do that. It just diffuses the lighting a little bit and makes
Hmm.
it less harsh. So if you're a student, you don't want shadows falling across your paper. Like you want to be able to truly just kind of be in that beautiful diffused light. And then another thing, a lot of research is coming out on is amber lighting. So I've seen now that like on Amazon and some other places, teachers are starting to order little light covers that have an amber glow, which is just softening the whole space. And we have one little second grade boy here who has one at his house. And he told his mom, can I have that amber light on? It just feels like a warm hug. And so it's just such an easy, simple way to just make your space feel more comfortable for you
Hmm.
and for your kids.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's talk now about visual clutter. We talked a little bit about my kitchen counter. What about visual clutter in a classroom setting? So, when I think about a lot of the preschool and elementary classrooms that I go
Mhm.
into, so many that I see are splashed with bright colors all
Mhm.
over the place. The walls, the floors with rainbow rugs, you name it.
Mhm.
Dozens of posters on the wall that might be the ABCs and math formulas, and maybe it's kids' artwork, but a lot of times when I look around, like every wall has something covering almost every square inch of field
Yes.
sometimes. So, what does the research show us about how the visual field impacts a child and their learning and their functioning?
Yes, this is such an important question. And I know you and I both spend a lot of time in classrooms, and this is my fourth school. I've been in a lot of classrooms and I've seen the same thing. And the thing that I've noticed, and I know that like this might land kind of hard, is that a lot of times what we put on walls for kids are actually for adults. So we are decorating a space in a way that we think is cute, right? With fonts that they might not be able to read, with colors that might be really overwhelming. And then the other thing that I like to just remind adults of is that we have we have gone through so much life at this point that we are able to kind of filter out, our visual cortex is able to filter out what's important and what's not, right? Like we've learned how to scan an article or to scan, if you're walking into maybe a new office building and you're looking for a new dentist, you see all these signs everywhere, but you know the one that you're looking for. So you're not really paying attention to the things that are not relevant to you. But for young children, they don't have that skill developed yet. So their visual cortex is truly bringing in every single thing that's on the wall with equal importance. And
Mm,
that is one of the things that really creates a lot of emotional dysregulation, a lot of distraction in spaces. And so experts agree there is a lot of research around this topic that 20% of your wall should be covered and the rest should be blank. So we want really, I know that that feels uncomfortable. It feels, like, oh my gosh, what would I even have up? That sounds so boring. But what we want to think about is at least decluttering by like 50%. Like you want to be able to see wall space. And so I'm thinking about like things like anchor charts. If it's an anchor chart and it's something that you're learning right now and your kids are still actively referencing it, perfect. Obviously, leave that up. It's doing its job. But if it's an anchor chart that maybe we just worked really hard on and we drew cute pictures on it and we just want to keep it up because it's cute, those are the kinds of things that, like, once they know the skill, we can go ahead and take that down. We want that to be interchangeable. Other things like reference posters, sometimes we go and buy reference posters. And again, if it's something that we're utilizing right at the time and it's relevant to what the kids are learning, perfect. But as soon as they kind of grasp that concept or you move on to the next thing, go ahead and take it down. Otherwise, it's just going to create kind of visual clutter. Another important rule is we want everything above eye level to be clear. So thinking about the height of your kids. So when I taught kindergarten, I would literally stand on my knees to like put up anything in the space. And that was just so that like if there was a map, I wanted them to be able to see the map right here. If there was a letter wall, I wanted them to be able to see that right here. And of course, everybody's classroom is different. So if you have cabinets or something in the way, then of course it's fine to put things up higher. But if you have the freedom and the choice to decide, okay, do I hang this like 6 feet up on the wall or do I put it down at their level? Put it down at their level. Because
Mm.
that's really just the most meaningful to them. And then the other thing I'm thinking through is just color palettes too. So I remember in like 2016, the big thing in classrooms was neon. Like we all had the Astro Bright paper up. And I did it too. I mean, the black and white and neon was like everywhere in every classroom with the chunky fonts. Anybody teaching at that time is like visualizing exactly what I'm talking about. But what we know now and can do better about is color palette. So, and there's a rule for this, kind of a formula that interior designers use that is really effective also in a learning environment where you just feel drawn to make everything bright and colorful. 60% neutral, 30% cool colors, and then just a splash of 10% warm colors. So we're thinking 60% neutrals. Of course, that's going to be your ceiling, your walls, your floor. They all count for that. So you've got a lot of neutral already. Those are, of course, your whites, your browns, and then your 30% cool colors. So when you're out, thinking about what colors am I going to use to, laminate this or decorate with this or classroom decor, always kind of leaning into those cool colors because those improve focus, they improve productivity, and then your warm colors are kind of stimulating to your brain. So that's really good. They're activating, they're engaging, but if we have too many of them, all of a sudden we're distracted, we're energized, we're feeling a little stressed. That's why, things that are meant to alert us are in red or orange because or yellow because they're like cautioning us. So that's another thing to keep in mind is just the color palette that you choose is actually really important also.
Okay, can you tell me what's the difference, or maybe give me some examples of what a cool color is versus a
Mhm.
warm color?
Great question. Yes, Sarah. Okay, so your cool colors are your blues, your greens, like a turquoise. Those are going to be your cool colors. And then your
Okay.
warms are, of course, like red, orange, yellow.
Okay.
And those are the things that are just a little more vibrant and they're just going to be a little more attention catching.
Okay. So a cool color isn't necessarily like a light tint. Like it's
Right.
not that it's like a pale color.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just like
correct.
more like the blues, the greens, like that
Yes, yes.
side. Okay.
And in fact, universally, the most calming color is navy blue. So that is from color research that is done across countries and across colors. And universally, the most calming color to people is that really deep navy blue. So that's a great point, is that it doesn't have to be like light. In fact, a couple of like really heavy, at least one really heavy color in your color scheme is really going to carry a lot more weight than a lot of really, kind of light pale colors. That's a great point.
Hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. I could see that with like kind of if you had like a navy blue rug or something that it would be kind of
Mhm.
like grounding, like
Yes,
something
yes.
that has some
And
depth to it.
Yes, I even painted my cork board. Like when I was teaching, I painted the whole cork board navy. And it would usually be that kind of like brown, like it would usually be the color of the store. But I was just
Right.
like, well, it could be any color. Let's just make it what's the most calming color for these 5 and 6-year-olds. So let's go with navy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Now, I'd like to talk about how you translate your research and the work that you do in schools to a home environment. And you mentioned
Mhm.
your kind of boutique business and how you did that for a while. Perhaps we have homeschooling parents that are listening, or maybe just a parent who wants their home to be warm and inviting and set up
Mhm.
so that their kids are, comfortable and can succeed. What are some must-haves, in your opinion, for a home environment?
Yes, that is a really important question. Number one, I love to start with that lighting. The lighting to me is the most important thing because it truly is what draws in people into a space
Okay.
or it kind of repels them away from a space. So I would start with lighting, making sure that you've got some kind of lighting coverage for every 50 square feet. So that is typically done with lamps. It can be done with windows, but again, if windows are a limitation, using those lamps. So that's your rule is one lamp per 50 square feet. And then the second thing I'm going to say is organization. So really, especially with young kids, we want to limit what they have access to. And not in a way, I know that sounds counterintuitive that you're thinking, no, I want them to learn more, so I need to provide them with more because that's more opportunity. But it actually works in reverse. So there's a lot of research about like toys and things that are available to them. And that research shows that the average child has about 75 toys available to them in their space, but that they only play with the same 5 or 10. So they're returning to those familiar toys. And so what we do, or what I used to talk to parents about doing, was removing just kind of the excess. And you don't have to throw it away, you don't have to give it away. Just put it in a bin, put it in your garage or a closet, and that's called a toy rotation. And so we're only putting out 5 to 10 toys, and I just say like the magic number is 8. And so you have, maybe these 8 toys, and then everything else is in a toy rotation system. And then every month or two, you just refresh those bins with different toys. And so what that does for your kids is fewer options available to them at one time is going to keep them more focused. They're going to come back and really repeat and engage in deeper play each time with those toys. It helps them to become more creative because they're thinking through what's another way I could play with this. Aside from, the obvious, like I'm thinking if you have magnet tiles, what's your most obvious thing? You're going to build, a house or something. But if you've had those magnet tiles out every day for 15 days in a row, and that's one of your only toys, you're going to be so far beyond I'm building a house. You're going to be creating a whole city. You're going to be creating I've seen my little boy play with the Magnetels as if they're people, right? Because he's like, I don't have, my mom didn't set up people over here for me to play with, so I'm gonna pretend like these are people. And it just really draws out more creativity when they have limited options. So that is my second thing, is truly organizing toys and kind of really limiting options. And then the third thing is really soft textures. So that's something that we haven't really covered today. But I just think that there is such value and such importance in having like things like a soft chair, a soft pillow, a soft rug to sit on or lay on. That's one of the things that kind of draws them in. It helps them play on the floor, which is really good for them. Like we want them on the floor, we want them building, we want them to have big open space where they've got, these Magnetels or these dinosaurs or Barbies or whatever it is that they're playing with. They've got all this space. Well, they need a soft texture to kind of be down on the floor with. And what I recommend there is always a low pile. Like you don't want a rug that's going to be so fluffy that they can't build anything because it keeps tumbling over because it doesn't have a
Mm.
strong base. So you want it to be soft, but also low pile. And we have an enormous Amazon rug in our playroom. It's sage green, and it truly just draws my kids in and they just sit there and play. So soft textures. Other options are like I know a lot of people have the Nugget, the little play couch, and there are, some dupes of that on Amazon now for a more affordable price. So that's another great thing. And the reason that soft textures are so important is that of course, they just kind of draw you into a space. Like, you want to be on a big soft couch or with fluffy pillows as an adult. And kids
Mhm.
have those same desires. They want their loveys, they want their blankets, they want, a play couch to build on. They want to make a little fort. They just like to feel the comfort that comes with those soft textures. So that would be my third thing for a home space for sure, and for schools.
Okay. I am a huge proponent of the toy rotation.
Yeah,
I have done that for years. And
it's
I mean,
amazing.
100% agree with what you're saying that if I let it go for a while and things have gotten cluttered, or maybe it's after a birthday and we've had, an influx of things, it
Hmm.
truly is just like the kids can't focus. They're not playing as deeply. They're not being as creative because they're just bouncing from one thing to another and pulling out this. And the toy rotation is
Yes,
such a great idea.
it's life-changing.
One, yeah, one question I have is sometimes you see, pictures of people's playrooms,
Hmm.
and maybe they have something like one of those IKEA systems where, it's kind of got the big squares and then like the pull-out bins or, something like that. How do you feel about bins that the kids can't see through? Like, is that something that's like, yes, that is ideal because it kind of reduces clutter, or does that hinder like play and access in some way?
That is such a great question. And I do have an opinion about it.
Okay.
So, and I have two different opinions depending on who you are. So, option one for playrooms and spaces, I like bins that you cannot see through because it's minimizing your visual clutter. So,
Okay.
for example, if you have a clear bin and inside that bin you have Legos and there are all these different shapes and pieces and colors, that's immediately like increasing the visual clutter in your space. So that is actually what I recommend for playrooms. And like this is the one place where I tell families to invest because you want to have matching containers. So matching containers, you're gonna walk in. We all love beauty and order, right? Even
Mhm.
kids. And so when you've got those matching containers and they're well labeled, that's the trick is like you just need to have labels, and there are plenty on Teachers Pay Teachers, which is free for anybody to go to. You don't have to be a teacher. And there are plenty of free options there that are editable, that it's like a little a little PowerPoint. You download it. You can go and screenshot pictures of your kids' favorite toys if you want to put them on that label. And then if they need a picture, they've got that there. So I always like that for playrooms and then also for the toy rotation. Again, you just have all your matching bins, you've got your labels. My only place where I say clear is for teachers in like their personal storage. So, for example, if you're a teacher and you have a cabinet or you have a closet, your brain teachers answer, I mean, research shows between like 500 and 1,000 questions a day. It's insane. Your brain is going so fast and it is so busy that you can just process what you're seeing faster than you can process what you're reading. So that's the one place where I say, if you're an educator and it's your personal storage, like in a cabinet, you want that to be clear because if you are in the middle of teaching a lesson and this kid needs a glue stick and you've got to run over to the cabinet, you're not going to take the time to read through all your labels. You know what's in your mind, right? You're looking for that glue stick, you're going to pull that out. So that is when I say clear.
Okay, got it.
That's a good question.
Our, yeah. Okay. So that leads me to something else that I've been thinking about, which is the Montessori environment.
Mhm.
The Montessori classroom is open shelves and everything. You can see it all there, right? And the kids can see each individual thing and be able to pull it out. And I know you've worked in Montessori classrooms.
Mhm.
And the Montessori philosophy is something that we've talked a lot about on this podcast. So most of the Montessori classrooms that I've been in are filled with natural light that we've talked
Mhm.
about, a lot of earth tones, lots of wood materials and things like that. Not a lot of colorful posters on the walls. Oftentimes I see house plants all around, in the windows. And I also sometimes see or smell, I should say, essential oils being
Yes.
diffused or soothing music, like kind of instrumental background, like elevator music, if you will.
Yes,
So it's like
absolutely.
a real vibe, when you
Yes.
go into some of the classrooms. So I think one thing that's really incredible to me is that Maria Montessori knew the importance of these things over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm curious from your experience, what sorts of things stand out to you specifically about a Montessori environment that you see backed up by research today?
Yes. That is such a great question, Sarah. So I spent my first 3 years in education actually in Montessori. So that is kind of the whole lens that I have in all of my education experience is I'm always filtering everything through that base lens that I had, which was Montessori. So the prepared environment and the classroom being the third teacher. And what really stands out to me now that I'm, kind of so far into this research is Maria Montessori truly reverse engineered neuroscience before she had any language for it. So 100 years ago, she was just observing and she was just seeing what do children gravitate towards, when are they calmer, when are they more focused, and then she was, writing that in her studies. So now, we have all this research about the benefits of natural light and serotonin and cortisol and all those things. I don't know that she had all that research. She was just noticing they feel better, they work better, they can collaborate and focus for a long time when they have natural light. So those are the things where I'm like, science continues to prove her right. And that is what I think is so beautiful about Montessori. And then the important thing there is that you don't have to work, sometimes I think that we think that to have that vibe that you just described, that you have to be in a Montessori or a Reggio or a Waldorf school, and you don't. You can truly do that in, PS 195 in New York City. Like you can do that anywhere. You need your YouTube music going on. You need a little diffuser with some lavender oil. Open up your windows, bring in as much soft textures as you can. Choose an earthy color palette. Like you're already making a lot of decisions for your classroom or your home learning environment. And so, if you're making decisions, why not just make them based on research for the way that kids learn best? Um, and then the shelves, yes. So the prepared shelves in Montessori are very different from like what most of us use. With you were talking about the IKEA, but yes. So Montessori shelves, like typically it's 3 shelves, and then you've got 3 different works on each shelf, and then typically those are like on a tray. It is truly just laid out in the most beautiful way, and the children get that tray of work. They take it to their table. They play with it, they clean it back up, they put it back. It is so orderly. And that's kind of the last thing about Montessori that is so important to me. And I feel like it's such a misconception. Oftentimes, because I work in traditional education, I hear a lot of people say, oh, they're just going to do what they want all day. And I'm like, no, they are not just doing what they want all day. There is so much intention with the way that the room is set up, again, to guide their behavior. So the room is truly telling them what to do next and what skills they're developing and working on. So Maria Montessori, I just believe, was so ahead of her time, and science continues to prove her right.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Okay, as we wrap up our conversation, I hope that you can share with us what is something that you think that gives people the biggest bang for their buck in terms of classroom environments or a home learning environment. So, if we have a listener who doesn't have extra funds for a big
Mhm.
classroom overhaul or, a home renovation, what
Yes.
would be one thing that they could do that really makes a big difference, but also doesn't cost a lot of money?
That is an excellent question. With that, I'm going to say the lighting. I'm going to say the lighting is the thing. If you're going to spend money on one thing, make it the lighting. So you're going to want to do the lamps with warm bulbs, like we talked about. That just gives your space such a cozy glow. It puts children at ease. It draws them in. It encourages them to just sit and stay a while and play and focus. maybe $30 on light bulbs and, lamps, maybe $100 if you're, really going big. But that is what I would recommend. And as I'm thinking through like prices, I have a ton of lamps that I've gotten from Goodwill or thrift stores. Like, go there. You can get a really cute lamp for $4, put a low lumen light bulb in it, and then set that up in your children's space. Give them like three lamps in their classroom or I'm sorry, their homeschool room or their playroom. And that's really going to give you the most bang for your buck. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. I also have some Goodwill lamps and like
Yes.
they're wonderful. I've had them for
Yes.
like a decade or more.
Oh my
So,
gosh. And you can find
yes.
some really cool, unique, kind of funky pieces there too. So
Right.
it's
Go to the
perfect.
thrift
Yes.
store. I
Yes.
love that. Kirsten, this has been so wonderful. I have learned so much about things that I want to do in my home, things I'm going to be looking for as I'm going into more schools and classrooms. And I just really love the knowledge that you've shared with all of us that we can take and really run with today. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.